LeAnn, the very last one that we believe saw Randy Leach alive that night at the party. We have a 45-minute interview coming up right now, but before you jump into that, if you have not already done so and you've not seen episode 1 and episode number 2 of Randy Leach, you're gonna want to start there. This is one of those cases where I still want to believe that this was an accident, but the more and more that we get into this, Sam,
having our doubts.
I don't know which direction this is, going to end up when Randy is found. My heart goes out to LeAnn because, as you're going to see in the interview, she kind of has that guilt as to what if I didn't go to the bathroom that night? What if I would have just taken Randy straight home? Would Randy be here and alive tonight? And with that, I mean, this has weighed on her for the past 32 years. So here we are, 32 years later, talking about this with LeAnn, the very last person to have seen Randy Leach alive that night. So stay tuned. This is one interview you're not going to want to miss. Thank you for joining us with LeAnn, who is what we believe is possibly the very last person that saw Randy Leach alive. And let's just jump into this. Like, who are you? An old classmate of Randy's. Take us from there. Introductions, LeAnn.
Okay, well, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
It was a pre-graduation party. It was scheduled for a Friday evening after school. It kind of popped up quick.
And when you say that it popped up quick, like nobody really knew that this party was happening until the day of?
No, probably that week before.
Okay.
Like, I think I found out about it on a Wednesday, and it was Friday night.
Okay.
And she said she assumed I already know. I'm talking about Kim Irwin.
Okay.
And she had asked me to come over early and help her set up.
Now, Kim was new to the area, and were the two of you friends before this, or she wanted to make sure that you were invited?
Well, we were both new to Linwood. I came the year before. In my junior year, she came her senior year.
Okay.
So she was there the whole year, and this was a pre-graduation party about a month before we graduated. We were to graduate May 17th. So I did show up early. I got over there probably around 6 o'clock that night. Her mother left for a brief period of time to go get party supplies, which included the punch ingredients that people have talked about.
And with those punch ingredients, they're referring to it as grain alcohol.
Some people say grain alcohol, but it was actually vodka.
Okay.
I was there when she got back with it. I was there when she mixed it up. I was there when we carried it outside to put on the table originally before it got moved back into the house.
Okay.
It was open to everybody because it was such a small thing, and it was a graduation party. We thought just for ourselves, for the Linwood kids, but that's not what it turned out to be.
Okay. Now backing up to her mom, her mom, kind of describe her mom. Wanted to be the cool mom, I'm going to, supply the alcohol for everybody, or how did all this take place?
She wanted to be the cool mom, sort of. She wanted to make money also off of this.
So the rumor is true that she's selling the punch to everybody. So this was not a gift graduation. This is hey, come on over, I need to make money.
The gift was some place to party.
Okay.
Away from your parents, basically.
Okay.
So, unfortunately, it wasn't just us Linwood kids. And a lot of the Irwin friends and family from in-town Kansas City came out there. There was tension at the party between the Kansas City people and the Linwood people, and I think that's what drove off a lot of the Linwood kids, because by what I would say mid-party, most of the Linwood graduating class was gone.
Okay, so as far as the graduating class, 33 in it. Of the 33, how many of them were initially at the party?
I'm just going to say between 25 and 28. I'd have to actually sit down and write out a list to give you an actual number. But the majority of them stopped by at some point in the night.
Okay.
There was only a couple that never were at the party at all.
And was it normal for Randy to go to parties?
It was not normal for him to come to a party like that and stay a long time. A lot of us used to just get together on the weekends wherever we happened to gather. And he would sometimes stop by, sometimes hang out for an hour, sometimes a few minutes just to swing through and say hi and bye.
Okay.
So no, it wasn't typical for him to stop at regular parties.
Okay.
No.
And again, I'm asking questions as they pop
Sure.
into my head before I'd let you just kind of like, I try to be quiet, but I have a rough time with it, as anybody that knows that watches.
I prefer questions.
Okay. And so with Randy, my understanding also is that when he did pop into the parties, I mean, he was more of a, hey, are there sodas available
Yes.
type of a guy.
Or, you know, in the summertime, but it was really hot, he would like drink a beer,
Uh-huh.
and then he would carry the second one around and make everybody think he was drinking a beer.
Okay.
And I think anybody who been out working in the heat in those hot summer nights would take anything cold.
And with the kids that were there, I mean, was it kind of known in the community that, hey, Randy has an open relationship with his parents, that he's not hiding that he's here, he's not hiding that he does drink on occasion? Or, you know, was there another side of Randy that was kind of kept from his parents, as, you know, some of us kids did back in the day?
I never saw him do anything that he would be afraid to let mom and dad know, or afraid if mom and dad found out.
Okay.
He just wasn't that kind of guy. Didn't really talk about an open relationship, but you could tell they had a good relationship.
Right.
You know what I mean?
So take us back to your arrival. So I'll try to, now that we've kind of set the stages, you know, Randy and, you know, your awareness of him. And so let's kind of take it back to, you showed up early with Kim, you guys are setting up the party, mom is, you know, come back with the vodka. Where does it go from here?
Well, she made the punch, and like I said, set it outside, and too many people were like getting access to it, I guess, so they brought it inside. So in order to have access to the punch, you had to go through somebody in the Irwin family to get to it.
Okay.
I spent most of my time outside. My boyfriend and I at the time spent the majority of the early part of the evening out by the bonfire. And at first it was okay. Kim's friends had like a guitar and was sitting by the fire playing music. But that's, you know, they were a little bit older. They started passing around joints amongst themselves. But earlier in the night had been smoking with some of the Linwood people who was supplying the weed for that round or whatever.
And are we talking about kids at the party, or are we talking like, you know, does Flanagan come into this, or like where's this coming from the local area?
I actually don't know Flanagan.
Okay.
Never met him. If I did, I wouldn't know that I met him. I did work at 3 places in our little bitty town here, so I'm sure I did see him at some point. But as far as I know, the weed that was being smoked by the Linwood kids were just whatever they had personally acquired for personal use.
Okay.
And I would think the same thing at the time. I was thinking the same thing with the Kansas City people. And they were happy to smoke what the Linwood kids had, but they didn't want to share
Right.
when their turn came around. And that's kind of where some of the tension started, was out there in the field. And that's what broke up part of the party.
Okay.
Because it just became very uncomfortable. Well, actually, the whole night was uncomfortable. It was weird when people who were not part of Linwood showed up. Because in the early hours, even the underclassmen stopped by, because it was the first big party of the warm-up of the year. And a lot of them stopped by, but even they said it felt weird to them. You know, they always were so excited to be at, you know, a senior party, but they all left early.
Right.
As the night progressed, there was really nobody out in the pasture except for the Kansas City people. And when that happened, I started hanging around a little bit with people in the garage that were from our school, who at that point were also older kids from our school who had graduated in the year prior, 2 years prior. And after my boyfriend left, I just started walking around, talking to different groups wherever they were at. And that's how I came upon Randy.
Okay.
In his condition that he was in, was outside in the driveway. And I was kind of, at that point, ready to go home myself.
Now kind of a time frame. So, I mean, you showed up at what time at Kim's,
I
and
got
now
the-
we're at, what time did the tension start, and then what time are we at now?
So I got there about 6 o'clock. And there was a lot of come and go people between like 6 and 10.
Okay.
And at 10 o'clock, 9:30, 10 o'clock is when a lot of the older classmen started showing up. The Kansas City people started showing up. And everything was, okay for an hour or so. Around 11 is when a lot of people, kind of started moving around. They were uncomfortable trying to find a spot to settle in. And by midnight, I'd say a lot of people had left. And then, like I said, I started just kind of mingling around with people. And I even went down in Kim's bedroom for a while and just hung out down there. And at that point in time, decided, I'm going to make my round, say goodbye to everybody, and I'm going home. This is around 1 o'clock. So by the time I kind of made my way through and talked to people, it was around 1:30 when I started going to my car, and that's when I ran into Randy. He was really goofed up. I mean, now as a medical professional, I recognize that what he was exhibiting was not alcohol intoxication.
Okay.
It was something much different. I can't give to a degree of medical certainty what drug it was. To me, it would be what most people today call a roofie, the drug that they're using in that instance, and that's GHB.
Okay.
It had started coming onto the scene back in the 80s. It wasn't huge back then, but it had started showing up. He didn't even have control of his fine motor skills. He was barely able to stand up. He was very slurred in the speech. And he kept he was talking about his keys. He can't find his keys, he can't find his keys. He's got to get home, he can't find his keys. So he's trying to get his hands into his pockets, and he can't. He can't make that fine skill work for him at that point. So I actually looked for his keys.
Okay.
He didn't have them in his pockets. He didn't have them in the shirt pockets. There were no keys. So I'm like, I will take you home. Let's get in my car. But I got to go to the bathroom. So I put him in my car, locked him in, had my keys, went up to the house. I was gone maybe like 15 minutes total. There were 2 people in front of me in line for the bathroom.
Uh-huh.
By the time I got back to my car, Randy was gone.
Okay, so let's pause right there while there's a few things in my head. So you as a medical professional, you understand what, alcohol,
Yes.
as being drunk looks like. You understand what the difference with, being high is.
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying that this was not either one of those two. And was there anything throughout the evening with anybody else that you experienced or witnessed that there was any other type of a drug that may have been at the party that night? And if so, was anybody else experiencing the same thing?
There was nobody else experiencing what I saw Randy experiencing, but there were other drugs at the party, at least cocaine.
Okay.
I know for sure was there, because that was in the house. I saw it.
And among the students or among the parents that were there?
I would say it was in complete control of the adults there.
Okay. And they were not letting the children partake of it, or it was some of them were?
I never saw them let somebody else do it, but I heard from other people that they had done it.
Okay.
But this was after the fact.
Okay.
Because they were like, it was so cool, we were able to get coke at the party.
Right.
Kind of thing.
And then with your vehicle, kind of in relation to, if you can kind of give us a overview for us to try to understand, where was your car, where was Randy's car at? Because there's a few things that we had heard from this as well that maybe, let me bring that in right now. Was Randy's car parked in the driveway over at Flanagan's?
I don't know.
Okay. So you never saw where Randy's mom's car was parked?
I didn't specifically look at cars
Okay.
that night. When I started looking, I was looking just for him.
Okay. Another story that we have heard is Teresa, past girlfriend, wanted to be a girlfriend. Was she involved with any
Just
types
started dating type of girl.
Okay, so they were together.
They were. And when I met her through him at Stouts.
Okay. And is she involved with any of these drug stories that we've heard, that she was in the drug world and that he wanted to help get her out of it?
That was my understanding as well, yes.
Okay, so it was kind of a known
Common
thing.
knowledge that she was somebody you could approach to get something you needed.
Okay.
After I knew who the name was, I had heard people talk about Teresa, or some people called her Red.
Okay.
That you could approach her to get stuff, which, because of the drug thing, I just had an aversion to drugs.
Right.
Because of prior life experience with my family members. And so I didn't have a lot of the details of the, if I wanted to go buy a bag of weed, who I would go to. I'd have to go somebody I knew who did it, who then would say. But the guys I dated did like to smoke a little weed.
Right.
And they would say, can you call your brother to get some? And I'm like, no. And they're like, who else does it? And of course they knew who did it. And do you know how to get a hold of that person?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they would make their connections slowly, one person at a time.
Oh yeah, in a small town, small school, or even big schools too. I mean, yeah, you just know who those circles are.
Yeah.
And so with that, was Randy ever known to give into any type of peer pressure, or is he was strictly a give me my soda or give me one beer if it's a hot and I'm going to carry around the second one all night?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, if there wasn't something else for drink, I mean, there was even times where he would have like a McDonald's cup in his vehicle and would get ice and water out of the bottom of the ice chest, but now we know that's gross, but back then...
Yeah, can you believe back in the day we used to actually bob for apples?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But, no, I mean, he just wasn't into it. He liked his people that he went to school with, his friends, and liked to connect with them, but didn't want to be around what everybody else was doing. Because, I mean, we would stay out late.
Right.
Especially when we were down by that one bridge over Stranger. It was super easy for me. It was a mile from my house. I walked.
Right.
Kind of thing. And a lot of other people did too. Would park their cars at my house and walk down to the bridge.
Okay. So now here we are. You were just in line with the restroom. 15 minutes later, you locked Randy inside of your car.
I did.
Okay. And where is your car in relation to the bathroom in the house, and where this was at?
If my knees are the house and the road is down here, my car was right here on the side of the house.
Okay.
But close to the driveway.
Okay.
Because I didn't want to get stuck there if I decided to leave.
Okay. So 15 minutes later, you come back. Randy is gone.
Randy is gone. My driver door is locked, but the passenger door is open.
Okay.
Unlocked.
And open, or just,
no, it was closed.
Just unlocked. Okay.
Just unlocked. And so I thought, he was so messed up. And of course, I just thought he was drunk back then. And first thing you think of was puking when you're that messed up. So I thought maybe he'd let himself out of the car to get sick. And maybe had fallen down in between the car or in between any of the other cars that were parked in that area. I think there was like 8 cars parked there, if I remember right, that were in that little square patch. And then the other cars lined the driveway, all the way up and around.
And tension at the party between the new school that has come in, but were there any fights that broke out? Any verbal?
But I never heard or saw any physical fighting.
And nothing towards Randy. So you never saw Randy that evening.
I mean,
get into any confrontation.
I had seen him earlier, before 1:30.
Okay.
Walking around. But at that point, he was somewhere else. I was still with my boyfriend, and we were kind of arguing ourselves that night. And I didn't get a chance to talk to him when he was out there at that time, but then I saw him later, at around 1:30. And when I saw him the first time in the distance, he seemed fine. He wasn't stumbling, he wasn't, you know what I mean, just normal. And I wish I could think exactly what time that was that I saw him, but in the mix of it, I don't remember exactly the first time I saw him.
Right.
But when I saw him the second time, I knew something was wrong. So I spent probably like 45 minutes looking for him after I found him out of the car. And I looked in between the cars, I looked all around the pasture. I went all the way up to the wood line, but not into them. Just crisscrossing back and forth, making rounds in the house, outside the house, around the fire. And it wasn't that big of an area that I couldn't make several passes in 45 minutes.
Yeah, and so with all these passes, coming back to the car, you didn't know what he was driving, you didn't know where it was parked, and so therefore you couldn't even identify if he had found his keys and if he had driven his car off. Okay.
And if I had specifically would have looked for a car, I probably would have looked for the truck.
Right.
And not the Dodge.
Because it was very rare that he ever drove his mom's car.
I always saw him in the truck.
Okay.
I don't know if I ever, maybe one time at our house I saw him drive your car.
Yeah. So then you leave the party. Or like, at what point did you make a decision to leave the party after you're like, Randy's a lost cause at this point?
Yeah, after
finding him.
like 45 minutes of looking, I figured there was, he had left.
Okay.
So I decided to, and being how messed up he was, I decided to spend the next 45 minutes just driving the roads.
Right.
Looking for him. Looking for the car or the truck. I mean, I would have noticed any vehicle parked on the side of the road that night as somebody else who could have been messed up and needed help. And I drove what I feel like was the most common routes that us kids use going from different areas. One route that apparently he traveled a lot, I traveled part of that route. I traveled up to the bridge that's not there anymore and right across it, but I turned around at Pam Phillips' house and headed back because I wanted to go back to what we call Red Bridge, named after that bridge because it used to be red. And there was over a little levee for a farmer's field. You could go down to the water there. There was probably 30 yards of small trees between that field and the water's edge. But we'd also cleared out a lot of it to use for firewood through the years down there. So that was someplace that everybody knew about. And there were people who had left the Irwin's place down there that night.
Okay, so there were two parties going on that night.
Yeah,
Okay.
that one busted, so they went to the normal spot and built a fire down there.
And you made it down there after leaving the party.
Yes.
And verified that Randy was
not down there.
was not at the new party.
Yeah, but he was not down there. Nobody had seen him down there that night.
Okay.
So I went ahead and went out a little bit further and took the more, the surface roads that were available at the time, just to look to see if maybe he didn't want to drive the windy roads. Let's get on the pavement. I spent 45 minutes. It's not a big area, so I've covered pretty much every road that was out here, anywhere that should have been a way home for him, and I never saw anything of the car.
Now, nobody at the party cared as much as you did, being the very last one to see him, and that you put him in his car, and that you spent this time looking at the party. Now you're looking, after you left the party as well. I mean, the relationship that you guys had as friends in school, I mean, was there ever a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship there as well?
No, but, your first day at a new school's tough. And although the guidance counselor had gathered some people to meet me and, introduce me to, so I'd have some faces to deal with, none of them offered to show me around. But Randy said, well, let me show you around. Nobody else offered, and you could see it on everybody else's faces like, duh, we didn't even think about showing around.
Right. So
that was the very first spontaneous kindness shown to me at Linwood.
Right.
And it made an impression.
And so you knew that you needed help that night, so.
Yeah.
And at this point, you've had a 1.5 to 2 year relationship of being friends with Randy.
Right, almost 2 years.
Okay.
Of course, I've been in first day of school or junior year, and then to our last month of senior year.
Yeah. And so now you've given up the search for the evening. When did you now hear? Yeah, so you went home. What time is it when you arrived home? And then when did you hear the news break that Randy is missing?
I specifically remember looking at the clock when I got home, because I didn't really have a curfew, but it was implied that it would be nice if I'd be home by 3.
Okay.
And it was 3:03 when I walked in the door.
Okay. So 1:30 we lost Randy. 45 minutes searching at the party. Another 45 minutes. 3:03 is when you arrived home.
Arrived home.
Okay.
And then and when I found out that Randy was missing was when Harold showed up at the door the next day.
Okay. And what time was that?
I think it was around 9:30 in the morning for some reason, but don't hold me to that.
Okay. And so with Harold, with them finding out at 5 or 6 a.m., what time was it when?
6:30.
6:30 in the morning. How did we choose to focus on LeAnn suddenly? Like we knew that she was closer then, or like you just started going down the list of friends?
Pretty much. We had some of them would come here, and say, hey, did you check here, or did you check there with them, and that's what we would do.
Okay. And so what's going through your head at this moment in time? And you know, you could offer up no more information than what you just shared with us.
Well, I was scared for him because of what I had witnessed of his condition that night.
Right.
And then I couldn't find him. And by the time that he came over to our house, my boyfriend had actually come over. And he was like, what do you mean, kind of thing, you know. He hadn't heard anything about Granny's condition that night because he had left early because, well, we just had an argument. He went home. So he was upset about it, and I don't know what the thinking was, but I remember taking Harold down to where we used to party down there that day, and then he dropped us back off after we looked around down there, and then he went on his way to talk to other people, and we decided we were going to go start looking too. And we just walked around everywhere that we could think of, anywhere close, because my boyfriend lived on the same road. His nearly best buddy lived on the same road, but lived right next to the party house. And we all hung out together, so we walked all around out there, looking in that area. We looked in the cemetery up there, and just started going to places we could think to look.
And at this moment, now you know that we're looking for Alberta's car.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And
were there any? Was there anybody within your class that was acting strange or suspicious now that Randy is missing?
A lot of them acted a little bit weird, honestly.
As though they knew what may have happened? Like, I guess, where's your feelings in this? I mean, are we looking at an accident? Are we looking at, you know, where's your heart taking you? Where's your gut taking you on this?
My personal belief is that it wasn't an accident. Somebody actually did something to him.
Okay. So you believe that somebody came and took him out of the car?
That's my belief.
Okay.
Just, I don't know, a belief or just a gut feeling. I've kind of always thought that way.
And are we leaning towards locals within their school? Or are we dealing with we may have had
locals and the surrounding area.
Okay. So not the Kansas City kids. Like,
No.
we don't believe them at all. Like, they were just at the party that caused tension.
Yeah.
But we don't believe that they had anything to do with this.
I think the people at the party were an older stoner group who didn't want to mess with a bunch of high school jocks and cheerleaders. And that's where that tension came from.
Okay.
More than anything else. And they just didn't want to share what they had. And what I've learned through the years is that's the way things differ between the city and the country. You live in the country, you share everything.
Right.
In the city, you hold on to what you got. But I think that there were people from our own age group all the way up to twice our age involved in it, from Linwood County and Johnson County.
Do you have a gut feeling as to why?
There had been some talk prior to the party about, you know, it was great that Randy had a new girlfriend or was working on getting a new girlfriend, but maybe his choice could have been better, that she was known to travel within the circle of the people who moved the drugs in our area. And that he had made a statement that if they didn't leave her alone, he was going to turn them in or expose them or whatever. And that rumor was actually heard before the party. But again, it's a rumor.
Right.
But yet something happened at the party. Was that an opportune time? He was away from home, he was in the dark, there was a bunch of kids who were drunk and high, not paying attention, didn't really care what was going on elsewhere. I mean, when you hang out with kids and they're wrestling around and being silly or stupid, you hear girls screaming and whatnot, so you probably wouldn't even pay attention if you did hear something. I think I've always been more aware of things. I don't think I've ever shared with anybody here that I witnessed a murder when I was 3.
Oh, wow.
So that was in my head my whole life. And maybe made me hyper-vigilant, you know what I mean, hyper-vigilant about things. I don't know. But
how many people do you feel as though may be involved, and do you feel like any of them are ready to, if we've, it's 32 years later, I need to get this off my chest, Harold and Alberta need to know?
I think there were 3 for sure involved in the actual murder, and others involved in helping get rid of the evidence of the murder. I think that there's been a lot of people who have said that Randy is buried in the woods and they dumped the car in some body of water, or knew somebody in town who could take care of it and crush it, make it go away.
Right.
And that you would have to have the kind of connections to make that happen as far as crushing the car. But there's a lot of water around here, and there's a lot of easy access to it, just between their house and the 2 boat ramps. You have your door, you have DeSoto.
Oh yeah, we're finding a lot of water around
And
here.
then Edwardsville also has a boat ramp that at the time that this happened was very remote. There was no housing close to it at all either. It was a waterfront parking area and access to the river. That was it. And driving, when it was cold outside and you couldn't hang out and party outside, a lot of people would cruise from Linwood to Bonner Springs, and sometimes we just cruise Bonner Springs, and sometimes we cruise Bonner Springs and Edwardsville and just make big moves. Seeing who you ran into, then you would stop and talk or whatever. And so our access to Lawrence, if we wanted to go do something like go get a really good meal or something in town, we would go the back way through your door. So everybody knew about your door too. So, we are such a small town here that everything you need is somewhere else.
Right.
And you're used to driving, so, so many people speculate that everything would be kept right here. But if you're really trying to hide something, you want to go to the furthest point of your territory, or what you perceived as your territory. That's just what I think. I know that's not everybody's belief. A lot of people think he had an accident, and that's very plausible. It's just not what I feel happened. Because I don't understand how he could not have keys when I put him in my car, and within that 15 minutes get his keys and leave to the point where, there's no sign of him having had an accident anywhere.
Right.
Right. And my question would be, how was Kim acting the next day with you? Was she acting strange in any way? Did she have any...
When I saw her, it was later in the afternoon by the time I got over there. And I just asked her, what's going on? And she just started crying and turned around and walked into the house. That was the reaction I got from her. She only came to school a few more days after this. She wasn't there every day of the week until graduation. No, I think it got to the point where they just made arrangements, because she just wasn't there. I only had 1 class with her, and that was the first hour. And there were people who were outright kind of ganging up on her at times. And
So do we feel like the Irwins left because of something that they may have been involved in, or we feel like they left because of the pressure of the way that they were perceived after this? And my understanding is they they completely moved.
They did.
Right.
I think it's a little bit of both.
And what do you feel about the house fire?
That was absolutely intentional, but it was probably for insurance money.
Okay, so we don't feel like it was covering up blood stains or anything else, because you were in the house.
I was in the house.
So nothing happened in the house that you're aware of.
No, I'm aware of. And
you don't feel like it happened. Nothing happened in the house.
No, I don't.
Okay. So we're dealing with insurance fraud.
Because remember, there were smaller kids in the house that were being made to stay in their bedrooms,
Okay.
who were coming into their preteen years and early teen years and were rotten just like any other kid that age, you know, when something like that's going on. So they kept getting shooed back into their bedrooms. But I did spend time down in the basement, and I heard so many people, especially on the threads that have developed from your prior episodes, about he was killed and buried in the basement. Well, people don't think to themselves. In fact, somebody went specific to the point that he's 20 feet deep under that old basement. But people forget that there's no ability to have any kind of large equipment to come in there. You would have had to, between, at the very latest of some reports, of 4 in the morning. So we'll say between 1:30 and 4 in the morning, and then to the next day when the Leaches did get over there, which was early, they would have had to bust it up the concrete by hand, dig a hole by hand, put him in it, fill in the dirt perfectly, so that they could then apply new cement that matched perfectly.
Right.
Because it's my understanding that the basement was looked at in the first couple days. No? So nobody ever searched the house? No.
It took them 5.5 weeks just to go up and check the grounds.
Well, then let me add this, that I don't want to give his name on camera, but I'll give you his name, who had been down there after the fact and said that everything looked normal in the basement.
Okay. So we have an eyewitness that.
So somebody
everything's
who
normal.
had been in the basement prior to and after the fact.
Now, the way I understood it, Sparks and Spillman told me that they checked everything. And I said, you've checked everything, you know, and I was getting pretty adamant about what did you do, you know. And he said, well, Harold, Sparks did. He said, Harold, we didn't actually physically go check everything. We didn't have to, because Mrs. Irwin said we could. So why? You know, that's just the attitude that they have.
Well, I searched every room that night.
Huh?
I searched every room that night when I was looking for him. I went through the entire house myself. I looked in the kids' bedroom. I didn't care that the kids were in there. I was looking for somebody.
You didn't see anything.
No. By the time I was looking, the younger girls were asleep, and Dwayne and Billy was still watching TV in Dwayne's room.
This is a really tough one for us. You know, one is because most of what we focus in on is accidents, you know, people that have, you know, on their own. And so for us to even be taking this on and digging in as deep as we are, we're not here to find out the whodunits, if it's a whodunit. You know, we're here to just simply get answers 32 years later of, you know, where is Randy? And that's the message that we want to get out to everybody is, you know, if this is, you know, your gut, what's telling you is true, and there happens to be 3, 4, 5, one of you at this point in time, you know, please come forward for Harold and Alberta. Let them know where their son is at, so that way we can bring Randy home. You know, for everything that we're doing right now, we're searching, our specialty is, you know, underwater search and recovery of vehicles. You know, and so can we locate, you know, Alberta's car? You know, is Randy going to be in the car, or have the two of them been separated for any reason? You know, is it under the sand in the, you know, in the Kansas River? Is it under the mud in the, you know, in Stranger Creek? Is it in one of these local quarries? Was it an accident because he did happen to find his keys, or you know, or are we dealing with a dumping of, you know, the car and Randy somewhere else? You know, has Randy been separated? We don't have those answers, so, you know, so we really appreciate you, you know, taking the time with us this evening to, you know, share your story, you know, being the, what it sounds like, you know, the very last person to have ever seen Randy, you know, that evening. And I would hope that you have not, but I mean, do you feel any responsibility for Randy not being here? I know we're wearing masks. Are we allowed to touch? So, it's not your fault. Okay, so you need to know that, and I'm sure other people have shared that with you too. I mean, we're going to do everything we can to find those answers for you, for Randy, you know, for the Leaches, for Harold and Alberta, and everybody in the community, okay? So, I appreciate your time this evening. Is there anything else you would like to share on this?
No, other than the people who were surrounding those people, they know. It's hard to keep secrets in a small town amongst the peer groups. So there's people around the actors who know. They need to step forward.
So if what LeAnn, you know, is feeling is true, please do step forward. You know, anonymous in the description down below. You know, if you need to send a letter or a text or whatever. I mean, there's several ways to get a hold of Alberta. You know, Betty and Larry, post office box. You know, get a hold of me. Whoever, however. You know, if what LeAnn is saying and her gut is right, please help us out. 32 years later, let's bring, you know, answers home. Let's bring Randy home and the answers that the family needs. So, and we really appreciate your time this evening on this one. And, you know, again, the message that we want to get out to everybody, you know, help us bring Randy home. If you know something, say something. You know, if this is a secret that's been, you know, haunting you for the past 32 years, make it anonymous. Just let us. We're not here to solve the whodunits. In fact, I don't even think that at this moment in time, if I look over at Alberta, I mean, they don't care about the whodunits at this moment in time. We just need to bring Randy home. So we're going to continue to focus on the accident portion of it, or if he's in the water, you know, and then if there is a whodunit later on this, you know, the proper authorities and agencies will take care of it from there. But LeAnn, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you for coming.
Absolutely. And so, thank you for being here with us. Do stay tuned. There's links in the description down below, because next up we're also going to have more of an in-depth personal conversation with the Leaches as well. So, thank you for being here this evening, and we'll see you soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.